I'd like to call this special meeting to order. I just want to remind everybody, we're not voting on anything, we're not discussing anything other than the 5-year plan, so we have to try to keep it to that. Okay, I had a little opening statement here I was going to make regardless. I just wanted to remind everybody that.
Does anyone know how to move Caitlin from attending the panelist? Nope, I got it. Promote, see, you give her a promotion. There you go. There she is. Caitlin?
Yep, I'm here, just trying to get everything going.
Oh, so good, 2 of us.
There we go. Hi, everybody.
Excellent.
Okay,
Thank you, Sylvia, for getting this worked out. I really appreciate it.
Not a problem.
well, I guess I'd like to start with, there is no upside to overstating our future finances. If we miss to the downside, no problem. We end up better than we expected. However, if we miss on the upside, no good will come from it. We will end up with a shortfall. This is not a report card, but an honest look at the potential future financial situation. Our estimates should be on the conservative side to be aware of possible unexpected events, which always occur. I think this is my 11th budget, and maybe 12th, I can't remember. And I've never seen one where everything went according to plan. There was always something came up that we didn't expect. Okay, as a backdrop, I would like to give you an analysis of the state budget, and then we can dive into the specifics of our own plan. Okay, the state budget, which was $229 billion, includes new recurring spending for schools, mental health services, and healthcare, as well as resources for the Metropolitan Transportation Authority and for emergency rental assistance. Preliminary estimates show that all funds spending will grow by 4% year over year amid a projected drop in revenues as the temporary federal aid is spent down. The state tax collections in April totaled just over 10.9 billion, a 7.2 billion or 39.9% decrease from last April, and 4.4 billion lower projections in the division of the budget's updated executive budget financial plan, which has just been released. All funds spending is forecast to be $229 billion, 3.9% higher than last year. The statutory rainy day fund balance has increased to 6.26 billion and increases the maximum balance to 25% of general fund spending. But I wouldn't really be worried about that because they've incurred a lot more debt than what they can handle. What that means is when they don't have the extra money, grants dry up, they come out with their hands out and say, well, just like they have already done for this year, they've come and taken back money from the Medicare fund for the county. That will increase if they continue down the road that they are on. And that will greatly affect us. Falling revenue could force state lawmakers and Governor Kathy Hochul next year into decisions in which taxes will have to be increased, spending will be cut to fill in a multi-billion-dollar gap in the budget. And that's where they're at. That much increased spending is reoccurring, which means it's built into the budget, will be built into next year's budget also. They don't have the money for it this year. I can guarantee you they don't have the money for it next year. This will present a growing fiscal challenge to the state, particularly as temporary federal aid wanes and if there is a more pronounced extended economic downturn. But the gyration in taxes coupled with an increase in spending could be a rough recipe. This is coming right from the state. So, yeah, I'm not gonna read all of this stuff, but anybody's interested in it, Natalie did a report right after the budget. And this is all factual stuff from that budget. So in other words, I'm thinking, looking forward, I would not be expecting much additional aid from the state. Something to keep in mind. Actually, it may increase our expenses. Because every time I've seen the state come short with money, they'll come looking for money from you. And they do that. Okay, getting back to our projections, or the ones that are on the table. Okay, let me get to the general fund. Okay, under expenses, I see expenses for 4 years after this year or next year at 1%. I really do not see that happening. Any way, manner, shape, or form. I noticed, that we're expecting with everything is going up more than 1%. The contracts are more than 1%. The goods that we have to buy, if you look at the chemicals we buy, that's in another budget, but this all adds up. I noticed, our medical went up, 9%, I believe, this year. That inflation is real. It did happen, and even though we're down below 5% at the moment, the early numbers I saw was 4.1%. We might be around there. The other thing on the revenue side, I want anybody to jump in that wants to comment on this. State aid, we show the state aid is going up every year. I really wouldn't count on that. I would think we would be lucky as heck if it stayed the same. Sales tax, the big increase in sales tax was mostly based on building materials and gas sales tax. The gas prices are down now, so they're collecting a lot less sales tax. One thing I would comment that what the county does, they always forecast the sales tax at a very moderate increase. And so there's often a pleasant upside surprise, but I would not count on that continuing to rise unless price of gas goes up, because that's something that everybody buys.
May I interject?
Sure.
We take the county's projected sales tax numbers, we do not increase them. So we take the county's projected.
So
sales
they're
tax.
thinking that there's, even though there's no increase in population, they're expecting.
Well, actually, the city's life are getting increased population.
Not according to the census.
According to the census, we increased about 150 people in the city last year.
It dropped 300 according to the census, between the census, and they do a projection every year. So I'm going by the 22 projection that they use.
To the sales tax, the city takes the sales tax projections based on the county numbers. We do not increase them. And it's a modest increase from the previous year's projection, not the previous year's actual.
Okay, I'm just thinking that's not going to continue to rise, but well, okay, I don't see this year as being all that lucrative, but
I think we're $300,000 ahead of what we projected or
So-
budgeted this year alone.
okay. And here's something I have a real big beef about is property taxes. Okay, this has kind of been treated as a windfall. I look back on my assessment and it's gone up 23% in the past 2 years. Okay, I haven't yet faced the music on the new one, but this is not unusual. Another guy called me up just the other day, and his taxes went up, or his assessment went up 37%. The average for the city last year was around 6%. So if mine went up 37%, who the heck is making out on the property taxes? Somebody is making out great. Because everyone I've talked to has gone up immensely. Okay, we didn't give very much back last year.
I am curious how some people went up really high and some people didn't. I
Well,
mean,
I'd like to answer that question if I may. Mr. Serpinski has promised us that he is going to bring the assessed value of homes up to what they should be, market rates are close to them, because that's what the state board of
Well,
assessors.
that's not a problem, Mike, but the problem comes in when we take that money and collect taxes against
I
it
agree.
without lowering the taxes. And I mean, we all know that.
Yep. However, let's keep in mind that we didn't have any tax increases here as city residents for many, many years. Now, I've lived in my current home for 9 years, and we only had our first increase about 4 years ago. So we went 5 years without anything, and people tell me, although I don't know this for a fact, but people tell me that it may have been 10 years or more between assessments before the county took over for it. So,
Well, I wasn't one of those lucky people.
yeah.
and to continue, we just had a reassessment of commercial properties, and there was a 10% increase on the average.
That's all.
And
Yeah,
that includes the residential, so.
No, they hadn't been assessed in about 10
years.
years, so if they only went up 10%, they made out pretty good.
Yes. But according to Mr. Serpinski, his assessments are accurate, and I believe that they probably did,
Well,
but.
yes and no. If, you know, the thing is where it gets skewed is there are not many properties going up for sale right now. And I don't blame people, if you have a 3% mortgage or 4% mortgage, why on earth would you sell your house and have to buy one of these more expensively priced houses? It's really a skewed market. I mean, I can remember 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 6 years ago, there was for sale signs all over the place. Right now, there are very few places for sale, so they are going for a higher price than what they should. If 100 places went for sale tomorrow, they would not get their assessed value. I base that on every piece of property I ever sold, I didn't get assessed value. But nobody gave me any money back.
And I can remember when not long after I moved into my house. And I can't put my finger on an exact year, but I remember this very vividly. There were all kinds of homes for sale in my neighborhood and all over the city that were for sale for a really long time. Because nobody wanted to pay, you know, what they perceive as high taxes in the city. And, you know, Jackie, you said this before, and I'll just reiterate it. I understand what Mr. Serpinski is trying to do. But your home is only going to be worth what somebody is willing to pay for it. So if the assessed value goes up and up and up, and it comes time you really do want to move, no one wants to pay that for your house. I mean, and that's what I worry about. Without us as a council bringing down, I always screw this up, is it the levy or the rate? I always screw that up. Tax levy or the tax rate.
Great.
This is the rate, yes, thank you. So I understand what Mr. Serpinski is trying to accomplish. But I think that on the back end of that, we should be working to more aggressively bring the tax rate down.
Yes, I agree with that.
And Mike, you've said this in the past, and I agree. I don't think that I don't think it was wrong then, I don't think it's wrong now, that a lower tax rate is going to be more inviting for development.
Yeah.
You've got Scott and I know we don't own Skyway shopping center, but you've got this wide open piece of property, but why would somebody be tempted to build there? I know it's owned already, but if there were some kind of interest to build,
You think about, a little bit of recent history, we've actually lowered the tax rate quite a bit. It was about $12.10, I think, during the Reid administration, and he worked hard to, peel away at that and bring the tax rate down. And we're now, I think, we're at what, 10.85.
Yeah, but we haven't kept up with the increases in assessment. I mean,
Good.
I'm telling you, Mike, in the last 2 years, 37%, my assessment went up. If I was to be made whole, say, throw the city 2%. It should have went down 25%. We didn't go down that, nowhere near that.
Well,
And I agree with you, like, we need to help people out, because I hear people complaining about this all the time, and it's us, it's not Sapinski. You know, he can raise the assessments as much as he wants, but we set the tax rates, we set the tax levy.
well,
So-
to see what can happen with this, the city of Saratoga Springs, which is similar to Plattsburgh, although it's probably a little closer to New York City than we are. But they have, an average home price or assessed value around $400,000. And their tax rate is in the low fives, 5 and change. So that's half of what we pay. And that's, you know, according to Mr. Serpisky, that's the way it's supposed to work. As our home values go up, our property taxes go down.
Correct?
And I talked to Mayor Rosenquist about this before he published this 5-year projection, and I asked him, would we be able to match the commercial reassessment with a corresponding tax decrease for our residents? And he said, yes, we would be able to do that, and he would include that in his 2024 budget. And he also said that we needed to wait until July to be able to see what is the actual assessed value in the entire city. We need to know that before we start applying tax cuts.
It came out last week, it's final on this.
So-
Wednesday. I'm gonna do a little research on that too, because, you know, I did a little math on some of the rentals, you know, college rentals, and rentals in general. And did a little math, you know, you can find out what some of these places charge for that. You know, and I see, and I wanna look at the new assessments, because I don't wanna operate in a vacuum, but I look at some of these places, college places especially, making $35,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year on their places. They don't fix them up. They look pretty shabby, some of them. And I want to see if they're being assessed at least more than my home, because they're making $50,000 a year on their building. If, you know, and I don't know, I don't want to speak out of school, but I am going to research that. I think, you know, we're getting hosed by Sapinski in that area where, you know, if you've got a big money making place.
Yeah.
They should
Well, it comes
pay
down
their
to
fair share of their taxes.
comes down to a matter of trust. I don't think we are being told. I think Kim Serpisky's doing a good job for us on his end. The problem is on our end, I think we need to look at the city's tax rate and see what we can do to lower it. If we could go below $10 in 2024, I would be very happy, because then we would be competing with the likes of Glens Falls and Watertown and other cities around us that are managing to do the same thing that we're trying to do. So
Yeah, 'cause this isn't a very affluent area. I mean, I know we all like
you're
to think of
absolutely right.
ourselves as quite. It's nice, I like it here, and you do, everyone does, but. You know, to say that there's a lot of $1 million homes here, no, there's not.
Yeah, those are all out in the counties.
Well, some of those haven't been easy to sell. We've gotten a couple of people that had really elegant homes and, there have been takers for those.
Well, in the 5-year plan, you know, as council's role, the goal setting. You know, that's one of the goals that we're supposed to be setting. That's one of the things we're supposed to be doing as council when we do 5-year plan, goal setting. So I would like to see this plan updated. I'm not gonna be in the finance meeting this Thursday, my apologies. I would like to see this plan reflect below $10 as we're sitting here in agreement that we'd like to see this tax rate go below $10. I'd like to see what that impact is. If we do that, because this is where we can take a look globally at what we're asking for to help us plan the budget. So if we say, I want to be $10 for 2024, and then keep it at, let's see what happens at, you know, at $10, you see what I mean? Where does that put us 5 years down the road? If we want to reduce the sales tax revenue, I understand, you know, what the mayor is saying, basing this on the county. Historically, we're looking at, you know, 4.5, we had a bump there in 22. A little more modest there, and total expenditures. I agree with Jeff, you know, a 5% increase in 24 and then 1% and then negative 1% in 28. When we're paying, when we settle contracts and we're paying more than that, we'd like to see something a little more conservative there as well. Is not that I want to see anything doom and gloom, I just want to see a more conservative look. If our revenue comes out much better than what we anticipated, I agree with that. I think that's great, but I think it's important for us, and in particular for me, I want to see that tax rate lowered and see what that does to the rest of the budget. And I think that would help us plan the actual budget when it comes, because that's going to be right around the corner. Before we know it, it's going to be fall, and we're going to start talking about looking at the budget. And I think this is an excellent place for us to begin that projection. Julie, did you have something?
Mike said, I tried to interject at the time, but I don't like butting in.
You asked a question, did your question answered?
No,
Would you ask it again?
I didn't ask, I didn't get to it yet. You said that you, or that Mr. Stravinsky is trying to what, level off the taxes, make it so everybody.
No, he doesn't have. They do not levy tax, okay, and I know that's a very confusing thing to a lot of people. But they don't, they just assess your property as you think it's worth. this,
Okay.
That, okay, they give that back to us. And we set the tax rate based on what the levy needs to be.
Right, so are you saying that if everybody's eventually meets what they're assessed at, it's what, stop, it's gonna stop going up? What am I
Stop when
It's like it's gonna stop going up,
What
so
we're trying to do is bring every home in the city, well, not just the city, but the county, bring all the homes up to the same assessed value as other houses.
Oh,
in
they're
the
like,
market.
like, yeah, okay,
Okay,
okay.
but no, your taxes are gonna
Go on, I mean, I'm like, well, that's.
They're your assessed value, and I think there's,
I didn't want to, I wanted to make sure I wasn't hearing. So I'm like, no, that's not it.
Yes, if there were some kind of severe economic downturn and, you know, we went into depression or something similar, you might see home value drop.
we'll go back to 2009.
2018 or 2008, to your point, Councilor Gibbs, 2008, we did not see a decrease in assessed values of properties. It stayed the same, and for whatever reason, the property values in the city of Blythewood were mostly immune to the downturn. But we did not see a decrease. Just double check.
That seems to happen here.
We didn't see a decrease in the assessed values. 2008, we saw a 3.1% increase from 2007, 2009, we saw a 2.49% increase from 2008, and then 2010, we saw a 2.1% increase from 2009. So over across, we did see an increase in assessed values, even during that economic downturn.
But to answer your question, Julie, is the people sitting here that actually set the tax rate. So
So how do we get this?
we can't blame that on
It's-
anyone else. It's us.
Some of you might remember that we had a big discussion a few years ago about a 15% tax decrease. And that was met with fierce opposition. There weren't very many of us who were in favor of that, and that year, that proposed tax decrease ended up being something like 1% savings or 1.5% savings at the end of the year. So none of us were willing to dive into that pool and try to fight those sharks. We decided that rather than a 15% decrease, which certainly would have been well received by taxpayers, that we would go with I believe it was a 1.5% decrease.
1.4%.
1.4%.
Well, I didn't think you could handle, I think it was 14%, but it may have been 15. It's a little easy back there, but,
Sorry, Jeff, please, sorry.
but, you know, we had just gone through some elimination of departments. You know, there's a limit to how far we want to go on some of this stuff. And that's not the first time that's happened, and that's why I'm always concerned that, you know, the 5-year plan kind of keeps us on our toes, eyes open. Hey, if we underestimated where we were at, great, but you also want to keep alert to the fact that, you know, these things come on. And we need to be able to roll with those punches.
So we want to get down, are we saying we want to get down to that 10%, that magical little number of 10%?
Well, okay, we're not talking about that right now, we're just talking about projection. Do we think this is, you know, reasonable, or should we change the numbers on it? I mean, that's what we should do, and that's, I guess, what we are, we're having a good discussion, I like it.
That's what I want to see.
Couple of things that I really like about this plan is that, one, it was built by the state comptroller's office. So we're using an accepted model this time rather than something that's homegrown. So I like that aspect of it. I hope we'll continue to use this model because it not only addresses the general fund like the old one did, but also addresses some of our other expenses, which I think is wonderful. But I think that it gives a more accurate picture today of where we are. And, you know, the old plan that we worked with for a few years, it projected severe deficits out in the near future. And that hasn't happened.
Well, yeah, the economy changed quite a bit during that
Yeah.
stretch, it was a pretty boom stretch, actually, it's the longest expansion, I think, in the history of the United States, so I wouldn't count on that. And I think it is, I like the way it's written up, but I just want to remind you that the doom and gloom is right here in the state budget. They're the ones that are putting up the red flags, like the money is running out. They lost 4% last year in the retirement fund. They are spending more than they're taking in this budget year. Those things that they put in there are guaranteed to be in there next year. So it's gonna be even a bigger budget gap unless they come back and really, they don't take the gloves off and put the knuckles to us. And that's exactly what they will do. They've already started because they're already at shortfall. And, you know, people gotta get elected. You know, they're gonna probably try to spread around as much money as possible. They did some really funky things. They enacted a budget law that said no loans more than 30 years. The ink wasn't even dry on that. They did a 50-year loan for the Mass Transit Authority down in New York City. They are a huge drain on the rest of the state. You know, we're gonna be paying for their windmills and somebody's gonna profit from that. But I don't want to get too deep into that. They're on the wrong track. They should do a 5-year plan because it doesn't look good. I'm just trying to keep that in there, and we shouldn't hope for too much from the state. And, you know, we in our own budget, you know, we just reaped $6 million. We had, you know, 4 million touring routes and 2 million from ARPA. And I'm rounding, but it's pretty much it. You know, that's not gonna happen again. The federal government can't print any more money, or they're gonna throw the inflation back up. And the infrastructure money is gonna be all gone sometime next year, probably before we get to this time of year next year. So those things aren't gonna be coming back. Just to say, I'm not, you know, Mike, I don't think this is a horrible plan. I don't find problems, or I don't feel the numbers are correct on some things. Other things I don't. And I think we all should look at that, because, you know, this is not a plan. This is a projection, which is, you know, just that. I mean, if we think we can project 6 months out, we're probably giving ourselves too much credit. But we should also always be aware that things happen, things come up.
Well, but I'm gonna say, you're right, it is a projection, not a plan, but the projection should help us create a plan. Our budget
Correct.
coming up, and if we're saying as a council, we'd like to see, the tax rate come down, then we need to know what that looks like in years out. We can't just look at it as a single budget season we're working on. And I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, because this is looking like at, I wish these percentages would have got filled in, but anyway, I ran some of them. Huh? Like we said, so there's a lot of blanks. There was one that, there was one that just left blank entirely. For 2024 was on the water fund. We got. 1, 2, 3, 4, I don't know, got messed up. It was a. Anyway, I don't want to.
So
But
our,
anyway, getting back, it was to what you're saying, okay, we're assuming that the assessed values are gonna go up 3%, okay. And the levy is gonna go up 2%, so. On this model, we can only get back 1% a year roughly. I always round things, so don't. I did figure them out, but I really don't think we need to do that. I think everybody's on the right track, and we need to find a little bit more equity between the homeowners. And I don't know, I'm gonna do the research on that. It's gonna, we'll have to sit down and do some real research. But somebody, when I pay more, and everybody I talk to pays a lot more. Somebody made out much better than this. I wanna know who those people are. You know, some people are not assessed properly, I think, but I don't know. I'm not saying that until I do my homework on that, so
Go talk to Tim Serpinski. He'll tell you what, you know, maybe there are homes out there that he's planning to reassess. Maybe there are sections of the city that he's planning to reassess at some point.
we didn't miss many this time.
But the goal is to achieve that 100% valuation across the
All right,
entire.
he has to do that, yeah.
It's a mandate from the state. And
I'm not saying blaming him, I'm blaming us.
yeah,
Okay.
well, Juliet raised a very good point there that. So we have this 10% increase in assessed value. Are we going to pass on 10% to the taxpayer? And I would say, well, before we do that, let's consider some of the meetings we've had this year in which we spent way more than we thought we were going to for things like infrastructure. That's probably the biggest one I can think of is, you know, the amount of money that we're spending for things that are used, you know, around the city is way more than we expected. So inflation is there and we all know about it, so do you give back 10% to the taxpayers, or do you plan for future development and that sort of thing? By realizing that all this stuff's gonna cost more, so maybe 10% is not accurate, maybe, or not advisable, because you know, we can't leave ourselves short. There are certain things that we have to do for taxpayers, even though they might not like it sometimes, but we have to provide water, we have to provide sewer, we have to provide good roads, they, taxpayer citizens ask us for that all the time. Can you please improve my street? Here, there, and on. So we have to take all that into account too. And one thing I'd like to say in regard to that is I asked Mayor Rosenquist, you know, about staffing levels over the next several years, and we agreed that maybe if we were able to stay close to where we are right now, today, which I think is 218 employees, that we could save the city a tremendous amount of money, because we all know that's where the money goes, is for payroll. With the large majority of it, so. And he said, yes, he was willing to look at that and incorporate some savings in his budget along those lines, so.
Well, yeah, and that's what we owe the citizens is doing the best we can with what we have. No, Mike, it's probably not possible that you're gonna do a 10% tax increase. It'd be nice, but probably, but we should be looking at something to bring things back into perspective. I mean, you know, I look at the income for the city and that the median income and all that, and it's, you know, I truly feel for, you know, some people that, you know, their husband died or they were a single person, single parent. Because I was surprised to see that the average household was only like 2.1 people. So there aren't a lot of kids out there anymore. Not as many as there was. That's, you know, I don't want to go down that road, but because we're just one part of this. You know, the school and the county are also actually bigger.
Yes.
Not the county, but the school district is a much bigger tax burden than we are. But we can't really look at that because we don't have any jurisdiction over that, so we can lament it all we want, because I hear that all the time. And
Right.
people give you their total taxes and go, yeah, this is horrible. But it's not us that control the whole thing. We just control our piece.
We're actually trying to lower taxes.
Well,
We
and
would hope the other taxing entities do the same thing in the future.
well, and that's where things get skewed because, you know, when they have these large jumps, and you're right, like they need to do that. You know, keep up to 100%.
Yes.
But on the other hand, we gotta balance that with what people are paying, and I see a big inequity, and I gotta figure out where that is, because how can one person's taxes go up 27% in 2 years, and somebody else's must have not gone up hardly at all to make that average? Quite a few people, actually, and I'm just trying to figure out where that is, you know? And I will find out, I'll be able to come back at one meeting and say, hey, you know, I don't think some of these routes are getting properly assessed. I know that,
You're gonna say these properties were not reassessed and.
well, they were probably reassessed, but like I said, you know, and they're not beautiful, some of them. These college rentals, where they're making, you know, $40,000, $45,000, $50,000 a year. Well, to me, even though that building is kind of ramshackle, it's a gold mine. And it has value in its ability to create, you know, create income. So, I mean, I don't think it should all rest on homeowners. You know, I think, you know, we all are sitting here and, I know we are, so, it comes back on us. Well, I'm not sure, I don't think, I heard the doom and gloom thing, we're not looking to do doom and gloom here, but we do wanna have something that keeps us. Our eye on the prize, which is, keeping the taxes as low as we can. And you're right, like, infrastructure, you can't plan things like Lake Country Village. Boom, there it is, it's gotta be done, and. I don't know, for all the talk that I heard about it, I think Market Street was gonna be done, could have waited 5 years, or 4 years, or 3 years, but what would be the purpose of that? I don't know.
One of the things Councilor Locke recommended, and I thought it was a good recommendation, was to not only do the financial plan, but also to say, what do we want our city to look like in 5? I would say 10 years, because it takes 5 years to do one project sometimes, so a 10-year outlook on strategy, and I think. I can't say this enough, that I believe our public works department is being very strategic. The worst problem we had in the city infrastructure wise was the water at Lake Country Village. It looked as though we weren't going to be able to provide water to that neighborhood, and that would be an awful thing. But they did that first, and got it out of the way, and then they said, where's the second worst place in the city for infrastructure problems? Downtown. So now they're working on a project downtown. I like that. I like that a lot. It says these guys are thinking strategic. They're not reacting to crises. They're now planning ahead into the future. I think that's a wonderful thing. I think it's what we should all do.
Well, actually, that's in the charter, we are supposed to be doing that. I know we have, but yes, we should have, we're supposed, this is not just a, like your financial plan, but some kind of an idea where we're headed.
So Jeff, are you suggesting that we come up with a list of things that we would like to see changed, and then an updated 5-year plan submitted to council at the finance meeting, or?
Yeah, I think that would work, Chris, don't you?
Yeah,
Okay, we bring.
so tell me what you want, and I'll make some changes, present it back, but and I don't mind doing it.
Okay.
Don't mind doing it.
So a list that we would like to see changed in this. Subdivision.
In the financial plan, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things I'd like to change, but not in the city, but. Anyway,
Well, I would like to see,
Okay.
I've said this before, I would like to see what our outlook would look like. If our tax rate was $10. If we kept it at $10 for 2024 through to 2028, I would like to see what that does to our finances. That's my wish list.
10%.
Yeah, just lower it a little more, see what does it look like if it's $10.
So the translation, counselor, on this is not the rate itself, but the production of the rate on the assessed value in the real property tax line, which is the levy. So you look at that top. Let me see. Let me see, 1 second. I see. Yeah, you can look at that levy and employment sheet. Which it does have it in there, sure. But then translating that levy back to the general fund tab. And then see how that carries
Yes.
through.
Yes,
Sure.
I'd like to see what that does. Because I think that would alleviate for the taxpayers the burden of the increased assessments, so. I think that would make the taxpayers happy, if it's something that we can maintain. But I'd like to see how that affects this overall plan.
well, I'm guessing this is a spreadsheet that shouldn't be. You can play with this a little bit and see what. I don't like, I did that a few times.
Under the expenditures, for the general fund sheet,
It wasn't as in-depth as it.
right? Under the
Basically,
expenditures for,
yeah.
general fund sheet, it says 5% for 2024, and then it's 1%, 1%, negative 1%. I think that should change, not the 5%, but if our contracts are settled and everybody across the city is getting more like 1.5, or depending on the contract, or even 9% increase, I think that 1% should be changed.
What page are you on, sorry?
So on the general fund page versus expenditures, and the line that says total expenditures and other uses all the way over to the far right under the assumptions. It says 2024, 5% increase expenditures, and then it says 1%, 1%, 1%, negative 1%.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
But
Yeah.
our contracts that we negotiated provide more increase than 1%. And I think that should change to reflect that.
The contracts are applied to this year's, to the 2023 budget. And not the 2024 budget. I'll see what that looks like, because all those increases are applied to this year's expenses, not the next year. So the next year's expenses would carry over. Essentially at whatever normal increase it would carry over, but I'll go back and make another look. To see if the percent increase is more than 3%, or what the projected percent increase for the renegotiated contracts that will complete this year. And what that looks like carry over to next.
Yeah, because I kind of look at that as like a reflection on what the inflation is.
Sorry.
Hopefully they get down to 2%. I think 3% would probably be more realistic, but it is going in the right direction. I don't think we should hope for the worst there, but I don't think we're ever going to see like 1% inflation rate. It's going to be more than that. And I'm just, shocked at the chemicals, stuff for the
Hauling, all the services.
everything has jumped immensely, and I'm hoping like we all are that, those things are gonna level off and the Fed shoots for 2%. I think, realistically, they're probably around 3%, but to me, that should reflect the inflation rate, and this isn't a budget, this is what it could be, and next year, we're gonna adjust it again. The year after, somebody else will adjust that. And, so it's probably more accurate in the upcoming years, and I'm glad to see that, they have the 5% there, because I don't know, is this literally health insurance going on? 9%.
9%.
That's, we have been living in paradise for a while. We had some that didn't go up at all, some that went up to 2%, 1.5%. I don't know, I just think we should, keep our eye on the ball, because state isn't gonna be there back, so I can guarantee you that. They're already circling the wagons, and I'm not thinking they're gonna be helping us out down the future, down the road very much. But I really am glad, we don't really, but at work, I always used to say, about an hour meeting, you're productive. Get beyond that, we're just spinning our wheels, but I'm really glad. I heard a lot of stuff from other counselors that, I agree with you on pretty much 90% of that,
I'd like to say that Councilor Gibbs raised a good point there. A couple of good points. One is, let's see if we can lower the tax rate to $10. Well, right now it's $10.85, so that would represent less than 1% tax decrease. We may actually be able to do better than that. If the numbers that we're getting from the assessor's office are correct, and we think they are, then we should be able to lower taxes a couple %, I would think. And also the second point that Councilor Gibbs made was that, these expenditures that we see in the general fund going forward, the 5% next year is probably accurate or close to it. Those numbers will continue to increase each year. She thinks, and I think I agree with her, at a rate greater than 1%. So the only thing to keep in mind with that is as your expenditures go up, this may sound very elementary, but I think it's important to say, as your expenditures go up, then your opportunities to lower taxes go down. So it behooves us to try to keep the line on spending as much as we possibly can going forward. Something like-
Yeah. It sure does.
That's why I've heard one suggestion from Councilor Gibbs to project a 10% tax rate. Or, to predict 10% tax rate, a 10% or $10 rate on a $10 rate on, next year compared to this year, which is $10.86, a $10 rate would equate to a 7.9% decrease in the rate of the levy.
To go from 1085 to 10 would be,
A 7.9% decrease in the rate. In the tax rate,
Tax rate.
correct.
To bring it to what? You saying,
Pardon me?
to bring it to 11 or $10.
To bring it to $10, it would be a 7.9% decrease in the rate. We don't know what that officially would look like in terms of where the levy would land, because we don't have, my office doesn't have the final tax rolls. And then also just to keep in mind that those tax rolls are still subject to tax certiorari filings, Article 7 filings, as well as other court proceedings to overturn those assessed values. Some of them, not all of them, most likely a very small percentage when it does come out. When they do, when and if they are proceeded on.
Well, my suggestion is on the expenditures, I would like to see those at 3%. Because I think they're gonna go up that much, but at the very least, 2.5%.
Instead of
More
1%?
often, Instead of one,
Is that what you're
instead of
saying?
one, yeah.
Across 25 through 28. The counselor
Yes,
gives.
yes, correct.
Okay, so the counselor gives a question or point about where the increased payrolls are accounted for. If you look at the projected increase between 22 and 23, that is a 5% increase. So that's where that increase, that's where that increased value is accounted for. That 5% is also applied to the 24 numbers, and then it's even off at a 2% increase, 25 on. Which essentially aligns with the contracts that we negotiated. So essentially, we're seeing a 5% increase in 23, a 5% increase in 24, then an evening out at 2% increase across 25 through 28.
Okay, where
That's
you see
just-
that?
I'm sorry, this is from the expenditures, personnel services, and equipment costs and outlay as well.
Levy and employment?
No, under the expenditures.
Under general fund.
Yeah, and I believe that's accounted for in there. Not levy and employment. The levy and employment is really the number of employees is the one that Councilor Kelly asked me to adjust downwards, where we had it at, originally we had it, I think, of like 245 at the end of 28. And so Councilor Kelly said, can you lower it? Yeah, we lowered it, try to keep it under the 235. I think it has ranged between 245 to 220, 224 right now. That's what we're going at. So under the general fund, sorry, Jeff, under the general fund tab, under the expenditures, personal services, expenditures, equipment, expenditures and equipment, that 5% and that 5.9% is what we accounted for increase between 2022 and 2023. And so that those percent increases are assigned to the 2024 numbers as well. I know I just reiterated that, but hopefully that makes sense.
We have to remember that keeping the employment numbers at a level means that our future costs are.
Correct. Correct.
I mean, obviously, I don't know how it works for the city, raises and things like that.
So those are baked into the contracts that we just settled. We settled 4 contracts, all bargaining units we settled over the last 2 years. And those increases are included in here. Obviously, when we go back to this year's budget, we'll look at what next year's projected amounts are going to be based on those contract increases and raises and longevities.
Ask the mayor if he would lower those numbers, so I guess that would be included in the list.
Yes.
Lower the total number of employees.
And to Councilor Kelly's point, as people retire and you backfill those new people do come in lower. Even though the cost of insurance and the cost of healthcare, things like this don't change per employee, the expense, the payroll expense does change, it does go down. For a short period of time.
But we approved in the 2023 budget at a level of 224 employees. Is that correct?
Correct, that's how many employees we currently have. That does not indicate the number of employees that were approved in the budget, because there are still laborers and, backfills and positions that haven't been filled. And, obviously, we've got a, police department with a couple of retirees that, that or resignations. And
You said that if we could keep that number, that increase number to 5 over the next 5 years, that would certainly be amazing. So that number could go to 229 in the end of 5 years.
yeah, 229, 230-ish. I think I put 235 in at the end. And the original number, I believe, was like 240.
240, yeah,
I think it was, right?
that's what he's got for 2027. And
Yeah, that's 240, yeah. So, again, when we look at, future plans and, the Councilor Bob's suggestion is, where do we want the city to be in 5 years and what sorts of things do we want to be providing? We do have to look at what the cost of providing those things are and staffing and demand and resources that the city has. So we expend on providing those types of services or programs or projects.
This we're saying today, I think we experienced rain that we have never seen before in recent days, and our city seems pretty resilient. There doesn't seem to be a lot of giant puddles that nobody can drive through or that sort of thing. So I think
In my basement. Would probably be.
well, it's hard.
I mean.
Council Kelly, I know that's a bit off topic, but yeah, even today, sent message to emergency services folks and said, hey, just keep me up to date to see if anything's happening. They looked at the traditional trouble spots that have traditionally flooded, monitored the Saranac, Underwood Park, of course, some of the other low-lying parks, and they haven't seen any issues so far, but they're right.
It's high, but it's not bad. I drive over Southampton Bridge, it's raging, some tears.
Never seen that.
We were lucky.
Never seen that
We
come.
did not get the rain in some places.
Yeah, that flooding.
Jeff is on the clock.
Yeah.
Are we ready to wrap this up or?
I am. Yeah, because we came up with some things that we were to check out. And, we can talk about those things.
So thus far, and I want to present this back to council with those suggestions, so. Thus far, I've heard the 10% or $10 rate.
Yeah, that was one thing I was looking at.
Yeah.
but the thing, I thought we should have our expenses just a little bit higher to make them more realistic,
Okay.
but you know, that could be totally neutralized if we had, kept the staffing the same or a little greater versus.
Yeah.
Not really. Something to look at.
If there's anything else, just send a message, okay, Jeff, just have everything come to Jeff or Mayor Pro Tem. Either one, I'm fine with it, so. Counselor Bob, anything? Yes.
I had myself muted. No, this was really, really helpful. I'm glad we had this meeting. I think it was a really good and productive discussion. I also look forward to seeing these updates with using those numbers, tweaking it and seeing, if that's something that's feasible or solvent for us.
Okay.
Hope you're feeling better, Caitlin.
Me too. Getting there. Thank you. And Sylvia, thank you so much for setting this up. I'm really glad I got to participate and listen in this way. It was important.
You ready to conclude the meeting, Jeff?
Thanks, Chris. Yeah.
Oh, meeting adjourned.
Have a great night, everybody.